The timer hit 2:58:47. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez collapsed to her knees, the 60-pound rucksack still strapped to her back, sweat mixing with tears as she stared at the finish line she'd just crossed. Behind her, a trail of disbelief stretched 26 miles through the Nevada desert. Ahead of her, a room full of silent superiors who had bet their careers on her failure. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Rodriguez never planned on proving anyone wrong. She just wanted to survive basic combat training at Fort Benning without washing out like her drill sergeant predicted she would on day 3. Standing barely 5'4" in her combat boots, weighing in at 127 pounds soaking wet, Maya looked more like she belonged in a college library than carrying a rifle through the Georgia heat. Her father, Carlos Rodriguez, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic. When Maya announced her intention to enlist, he didn't try to talk her out of it, but she caught the worry in his eyes. Her mother, Patricia, was less subtle. "Mija, you faint when you give blood. How are you going to handle real combat?" The question haunted Maya through her first weeks of basic training. While other recruits struggled with the mental adjustment to military life, Maya battled her own body. The morning PT runs left her gasping while others barely broke a sweat. The obstacle courses that seemed designed for people twice her size became personal mountains she had to conquer daily. Her drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Thompson, made no secret of his skepticism. "Rodriguez," he'd bark during formations, "are you planning on asking the enemy to wait while you catch your breath?" But Maya had something her critics didn't account for, an absolute refusal to quit. Where others saw physical limitations, she saw problems to solve. If she couldn't muscle through a rope climb, she'd perfect her technique. If she couldn't match the pace on long runs, she'd train twice as long to build her endurance. Every evening, while other recruits wrote letters home or cleaned their gear, Maya was in the gym or running the track under the floodlights. Her breakthrough came during week 8 of basic training. The company was facing their final physical fitness test, and Maya needed to shave 30 seconds off her 2-mile run time to pass. The night before, she lay in her bunk calculating and recalculating the pace she'd need to maintain. Mathematics had always been her strong suit. She'd earned a degree in engineering before enlisting, but this equation felt impossible. The morning of the test, something shifted. As the whistle blew and 60 recruits surged forward, Maya felt her breathing settle into a rhythm she'd never found before. Her legs, which had felt like lead weights for weeks, suddenly carried her with purpose. She passed the halfway mark ahead of schedule. At mile 1.5, she was still holding pace. With 400 meters to go, she realized she wasn't just going to pass, she was going to demolish her previous time. Maya crossed the finish line with a time that put her in the top 10% of her entire company. Staff Sergeant Thompson stood there with his stopwatch, staring at the numbers like they'd personally offended him. He looked at Maya, then at the stopwatch, then back at Maya. "Rodriguez," he said slowly, "run that again." "Sergeant?" "You heard me. Cool down for 10 minutes, then run it again." This wasn't standard procedure. Other recruits had gathered around, sensing something significant happening. Maya's heart was still hammering from her first run, but she nodded. 10 minutes later, she lined up alone at the starting line. Her second time was 12 seconds faster than her first. Word of Maya's performance spread through the training battalion faster than gossip in a small town. Suddenly, the recruit who couldn't do a single pull-up in week 1 was being watched by officers she'd never met. Captain Williams, the company commander, called her to his office 3 days later. "Rodriguez, I've been reviewing your file," he said, gesturing to a folder thick with test scores and evaluation reports. "Your PT scores have improved more than any recruit I've seen in 15 years of service. But more than that, your instructors tell me you've been helping other recruits who are struggling." This was true. As Maya's own performance improved, she'd started staying after training to work with soldiers who were falling behind. She'd share the techniques she'd developed, the mental strategies that helped her push through barriers. Her engineering background meant she approached physical challenges like problems to be solved, and she could break down complex movements into manageable steps for others. "I want to recommend you for advanced infantry training," Captain Williams continued, "but I have to ask, are you sure this is the path you want? Advanced infantry is," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "demanding in ways that basic training only hints at." Maya thought about her father's stories from Afghanistan, about carrying wounded soldiers through hostile territory. She thought about her mother's concerns, about the drill sergeant who'd written her off on day 3. Most of all, she thought about the version of herself who'd arrived at Fort Benning 8 weeks ago, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake. "Yes, sir, I'm sure." Her orders came through 2 weeks after graduation from basic training. Instead of the support role she'd originally enlisted for, Maya was assigned to advanced infantry training at Fort Moore. The news reached her family through a brief phone call home. Advanced infantry! Her mother's voice carried a mixture of pride and terror. "Maya, that means combat roles. That means deployment zones." Her father's response was different. "How do you feel about it, Mija?" "Scared," Maya admitted, "but ready." Advanced infantry training was everything Captain Williams had hinted at and more. The physical demands made basic training look like summer camp. Weighted marches that stretched for miles through difficult terrain. Combat simulations that lasted for days with minimal sleep and food. Weapons training that required precision under extreme stress and fatigue. Maya's class started with 47 soldiers. By the end of week 4, they were down to 39. The instructors weren't trying to break people. They were preparing soldiers for situations where failure meant death, for themselves or their teammates. Every exercise was designed to find limits and then push past them. It was during week 6 that Maya first heard about the Endurance Challenge. The Endurance Challenge wasn't an official part of the training curriculum. It was a tradition that had evolved over decades, a voluntary test that separated the exceptional from the merely competent. Once each training cycle, any soldier could attempt to complete a marathon distance, 26.2 miles, while carrying a full combat load, which included weapon, ammunition, water, medical supplies, and emergency gear. Total weight, 60 pounds minimum. The current record, set 3 years earlier by a Ranger-qualified soldier named Marcus Webb, stood at 3 hours and 2 minutes. In the entire history of the challenge, only 12 people had completed it in under 3.5 hours. No woman had ever finished in under 4 hours. When Staff Sergeant Davis announced the upcoming challenge during evening formation, Maya felt something electric run through her chest. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. She'd already done that. This was about finding out what was possible. "Anyone interested in participating needs to sign up by Friday," Davis continued. "But before you get excited, understand what you're committing to. This isn't a training exercise. This is 26 miles through desert terrain in full gear. The route includes elevation changes, sandy sections that'll steal your energy, and temperature swings that can break your concentration. We've had experienced soldiers end up in medical tents. We've had people quit at mile 15 because they couldn't take another step." That evening, Maya studied the route map posted outside the training office. The course started at the base perimeter and wound through the Nevada desert, following dirt roads and established trails. Mile markers were clearly indicated, along with mandatory water stations every 5 miles. The elevation profile showed a brutal climb between miles 8 and 12, followed by a long descent that would test different muscle groups and mental reserves. She thought about the mathematics involved. To break 3 hours, she'd need to maintain an average pace of just under 7 minutes per mile while carrying 60 pounds of gear through desert terrain. Most recreational marathon runners, carrying nothing but water bottles, couldn't maintain that pace on flat pavement. But Maya had learned something important about herself over the past few months. Her limitations weren't where she'd thought they were. Every time she'd been certain she'd reached her breaking point, there had been more to find. Friday morning, Maya walked to the sign-up sheet posted outside the administrative building. 17 names were already on the list, including several soldiers she recognized as top performers in her class. She picked up the pen and carefully wrote her name at the bottom: Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, Class 47B. As she walked away, she overheard two instructors talking near the building entrance. "Rodriguez signed up for the endurance challenge," one said. "The little engineer. She's tough, but that's a different kind of test entirely. That's about raw physical capacity. Think she'll make it to the halfway point?" There was a pause. "Honestly, I'd be surprised if she makes it past mile 10. The desert doesn't care how determined you are." Maya kept walking, but she filed the conversation away. In 2 weeks, she'd have her answer. The 2 weeks between signing up and race day transformed Maya's entire approach to training. While her classmates focused on standard infantry exercises, Maya developed her own preparation regimen that would have impressed Olympic coaches. She started by breaking down the challenge into component problems. The weight distribution was crucial. 60 pounds carried incorrectly would destroy her posture and energy efficiency within the first few miles. Maya spent hours in the equipment room experimenting with different configurations of her combat load. She moved ammunition from her vest to her rucksack, relocated her water bottles for better balance, and even adjusted the placement of her medical kit to minimize bouncing. Private Johnson, her bunkmate, watched these preparations with growing amazement. "Rodriguez, you're treating this like a NASA mission." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Because precision matters," Maya replied, weighing her fully loaded pack on the equipment room scale for the 3rd time that evening. 1 pound in the wrong place could cost me 15 minutes over 26 miles. Her nutrition strategy was equally methodical. Maya researched optimal fueling for ultra-endurance events, calculating calorie burn rates and electrolyte replacement needs. She experimented with different combinations of energy gels and protein bars during her training runs, discovering which products her stomach could handle under stress and which ones made her nauseated. But the most significant change was in her training philosophy. Instead of simply running more miles, Maya focused on specificity. Every training session simulated race conditions as closely as possible. She ran in the Nevada heat during the hottest part of the day. She carried progressively heavier loads until she could comfortably manage her full combat weight. She practiced eating and drinking while maintaining pace, since stopping at aid stations would cost precious seconds. Her longest training run was 22 miles with full gear, completed exactly 1 week before the challenge. Maya finished that session in just under 3 hours and 20 minutes, which gave her confidence that sub-3 hours was mathematically possible. But she also learned something sobering. The difference between 22 miles and 26.2 miles wasn't just distance. It was an entirely different level of physical and mental challenge. During that final training run, Maya hit what endurance athletes call the wall around mile 19. Her legs felt like concrete, her vision started to blur at the edges, and for the first time in months, she genuinely questioned whether she could take another step. Only her engineering mindset saved her. She treated the sensation like a systems failure that required troubleshooting rather than surrender. The solution, she discovered, was to break the remaining distance into micro-goals. Instead of thinking about 3 more miles, she focused on reaching the next telephone pole, then the next intersection, then the next mile marker. This mental strategy would prove crucial during the actual challenge. Word of Maya's serious preparation spread through the training battalion. Other soldiers started paying attention to her workouts, partly out of curiosity and partly out of respect. Even Staff Sergeant Davis, who supervised the endurance training, began offering unsolicited advice. "Rodriguez, I've been watching your times," he said after one particularly brutal session. "You're faster than I expected, but speed isn't everything in the desert. The heat will try to kill you around mile 15. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, muscle cramps, any one of them can end your race regardless of how well trained you are. What's your recommendation, Sergeant?" Start conservative. Most people go out too fast because they're excited or nervous. The first 10 miles should feel almost easy. Save your energy for when the course gets nasty. This advice conflicted with Maya's natural instincts. Her mathematical models suggested that banking time early would provide a buffer for the inevitable slowdown in later miles. But Davis had overseen dozens of these attempts, and his success rate predictions were hard to argue with. 3 days before the challenge, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Captain Williams, her former commanding officer from basic training, had driven down from Fort Benning specifically to watch the attempt. "I heard through the grapevine that my former recruit was planning something ambitious," he said, finding Maya in the dining facility after evening chow. "I wanted to see it for myself." "No pressure there, sir." Williams laughed. "Rodriguez, you've already exceeded every expectation I had for you. Whether you finish this race in 3 hours or 6 hours or don't finish at all, you've proven that determination can overcome almost any obstacle. But I suspect you're not going to let it stop at almost." That evening, Maya called home for what she decided would be her last conversation before the challenge. Her father answered on the second ring. "How are you feeling, mija?" "Terrified and excited in equal measure," Maya admitted. "Dad, what if I can't do it? What if I've been fooling myself about what's possible?" Carlos Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of his own military experience. "Maya, I've seen soldiers do impossible things when their reasons were strong enough. I've also seen soldiers fail at simple tasks when they doubted themselves. The question isn't whether you can run 26 miles with a heavy pack. The question is why you're doing it. To prove that they were wrong about me." "No," her father said gently. "That's not it anymore. You already proved that months ago. So why are you really doing this?" Maya thought about the question long after the phone call ended. She thought about it during her final equipment check, during her last light training run, and during the sleepless hours before race morning. The answer came to her as she was laying out her gear at 4:30 a.m. on challenge day. She wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone else. She was doing it to discover the absolute limits of her own potential. Everything else, the doubters, the records, the recognition, was secondary to that fundamental question. What was she truly capable of? Race morning dawned clear and cool, with temperatures in the mid-60s that would climb steadily as the sun rose. Maya arrived at the starting area at 5:15 a.m., 90 minutes before the scheduled start time. She wanted every possible advantage, including the mental preparation that came from visualizing the course one final time. 18 soldiers had ultimately signed up for the challenge, though 2 had withdrawn during the previous week due to minor injuries. The remaining 16 represented the most physically capable members of their respective training classes. Maya recognized most of them, including Sergeant First Class Williams, a different Williams than her former captain, who had finished the previous year's challenge in 3:47. The pre-race briefing was conducted by Colonel Martinez, the battalion commander who rarely appeared at training events. His presence indicated the significance the command structure placed on the challenge. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to attempt something that most people consider impossible," Martinez began. 26.2 miles through desert terrain while carrying combat load. The current record is 3:02:15, set by Marcus Webb in 2021. The cutoff time for completion is 6 hours, after which we'll extract you for safety reasons. He paused to scan the assembled soldiers. "Medical personnel will be positioned at every aid station and will monitor each participant continuously. If they determine that you're in danger, they have authority to remove you from the course regardless of your wishes. This isn't negotiable." Maya felt her heart rate accelerating as the reality of the challenge crystallized. In less than an hour, she would begin the most demanding physical test of her life. Everything she had worked for, everything she had learned about herself, would be distilled into one morning in the Nevada desert. The final equipment inspection was conducted with military precision. Each soldier's gear was weighed, checked for proper configuration, and verified against the mandatory equipment list. Maya's pack came in at exactly 62.3 pounds, heavy enough to meet requirements while avoiding unnecessary weight. At 6:45 a.m., the 16 challengers lined up at the starting line marked by orange cones and timing equipment. Maya positioned herself in the middle of the group, following Staff Sergeant Davis's advice to avoid getting caught up in early race dynamics. Colonel Martinez raised his starter pistol. "Gentlemen and lady, good luck. You have 6 hours to complete 26.2 miles. Your time starts now." The gunshot echoed across the desert as 16 soldiers surged forward into the Nevada morning. Maya held her position in the middle of the pack, watching as several competitors immediately pushed to the front. She recognized the tactical error. Enthusiasm was burning energy that would be desperately needed in later miles. The first 5 miles unfolded exactly as Maya had planned. The terrain was relatively flat, following a dirt access road that wound through sparse desert vegetation. Her pace felt effortless, almost meditative. The 62 pounds on her back had found their rhythm, and her breathing remained controlled and steady. More importantly, she was banking time. Her split at the 5-mile marker showed 33:47, putting her nearly 2 minutes ahead of her target pace. Behind her, she could hear the labored breathing of Corporal Jenkins, who had gone out too aggressively and was already paying the price. Ahead, 3 soldiers maintained a blistering pace that Maya knew they couldn't sustain. She made a mental note of their race numbers. She'd see them again when they inevitably slow. The first real test came at mile 8, where the course began its ascent into the foothills. The elevation gain wasn't extreme by mountaineering standards, roughly 800 feet over 4 miles, but carrying combat load transformed what would have been a moderate hike into a grinding challenge that separated the prepared from the hopeful. Maya had trained specifically for this section, spending hours on incline treadmills and hill repeats with her full pack. As other competitors slowed dramatically, she maintained her rhythm by shortening her stride and focusing on efficient form. Her engineering background served her well here. She treated the climb like an optimization problem, finding the most energy-efficient path up each switchback. By mile 10, the early leaders had been caught and passed. Maya found herself in 4th place, trailing 3 experienced soldiers who had paced the climb more intelligently than the rest of the field. The temperature had risen to 78 degrees, and she could feel sweat beginning to pool where her pack straps met her shoulders. The water stop at mile 10 was crucial. Maya had practiced her refueling routine hundreds of times, but executing it under race conditions while maintaining momentum required precision. She grabbed 2 bottles, draining one immediately and tucking the second into her pack. Total time at the station, 14 seconds. Sergeant Williams, the previous year's finisher, was at the same station when Maya arrived. He looked surprised to see her so close to the front of the pack. "Strong climb, Rodriguez," he said between gulps of electrolyte solution. "How are you feeling?" "Good so far," Maya replied, though she was privately concerned about a slight tightness developing in her left calf. "Long way to go." The next section, miles 11 through 15, would prove to be the most challenging of the entire course. The terrain became technical, with loose sand that stole energy from every step. Worse, the sun had climbed high enough to create brutal conditions, with temperatures pushing toward 85 degrees and minimal shade. Maya's hydration strategy became critical. She had calculated her fluid needs based on her sweat rate during training runs, and she forced herself to drink on schedule even when she didn't feel thirsty. Dehydration was insidious. By the time you felt thirsty, you were already compromised. At mile 12, disaster struck the soldier who had been leading the race. Maya watched from 50 meters behind as Sergeant Collins suddenly veered off the trail and collapsed to his knees, his body convulsing with heat cramps. Medical personnel reached him within minutes, but his race was over. It was a sobering reminder that the desert didn't respect reputation or experience. The incident affected the entire field. The remaining leaders became more cautious, acutely aware that pushing too hard could end their day just as quickly. Maya used their caution to her advantage, moving into 2nd place as they crested the highest point of the course at mile 12.5. The descent that followed was treacherous in a different way. After hours of climbing, Maya's quadriceps were fatigued, and the downhill grades put different stresses on her legs and joints. She had to consciously adjust her stride to prevent her pace from becoming recklessly fast on the steep sections. But something remarkable was happening. Instead of feeling increasingly fatigued, Maya was discovering energy reserves she didn't know existed. Her training had prepared her for this phase, and while other competitors were visibly struggling, she felt strong and controlled. Her splits showed that she was not only maintaining pace, but actually accelerating. At the 15-mile water station, Maya found herself in the lead for the first time. The realization was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. She had 11 miles remaining, more than a 10K race, and she was ahead of soldiers with far more experience and proven track records. Colonel Martinez was at the station personally, monitoring the race's progress. As Maya grabbed her water bottles, he called out her split time. 2 hours, 6 minutes, 43 seconds. You're on pace for sub 3 hours, Rodriguez. The mathematical reality hit her like electricity. If she could maintain her current pace for 11 more miles, she wouldn't just finish, she'd break the course record by several minutes. But Maya had learned enough about endurance events to know that the final third of any long race was where dreams either came true or died completely. Maya's 15 through 20 miles became a meditation on suffering and persistence. The course had returned to flat desert terrain, but the accumulated fatigue and heat were taking their toll on everyone still in the race. Maya's left calf tightness had developed into a persistent cramping that required constant management. She had to stop twice to stretch and massage the muscle, losing precious seconds each time. Behind her, she could hear footsteps getting closer. Sergeant First Class Davis, not her instructor, but another soldier with the same name, had been steadily gaining ground over the past several miles. Maya caught glimpses of him when the trail curved, always seeming to be just a few hundred meters back, but never getting closer or farther away. The mental game became as important as the physical challenge. Maya's internal monologue shifted between encouragement and doubt with each mile marker. At mile 18, she felt invincible. At mile 19, she questioned whether her legs would carry her another step. At mile 20, she rediscovered her strength and pushed the pace again. The 20-mile marker brought both good and sobering news. Her split time showed 2:19:34, which meant she needed to cover the final 6.2 miles in under 40 minutes. In normal circumstances, a 6:30-mile pace would be easily achievable, but these weren't normal circumstances, and Maya could feel her body approaching its absolute limits. This was where her mental preparation proved most valuable. Instead of focusing on the seemingly impossible task of maintaining race pace for 6 more miles, Maya broke the distance into smaller, manageable segments. First goal, reach mile 21. Second goal, reach the next aid station. Third goal, find one more gear for the final push. Mile 21 arrived after what felt like an eternity, but showed on her watch as exactly 6:47. Still on pace, but with very little margin for error. The cramping in her calf had spread to her right leg, and she could feel her running form beginning to deteriorate. Each step required conscious effort to maintain efficiency. Behind her, Davis was no longer just following, he was hunting. Maya could hear his breathing, could sense his presence even when she couldn't see him. She realized that her race had become a head-to-head battle with less than 5 miles remaining. At mile 22, Davis made his move. He pulled alongside Maya on a straightaway, matching her stride for stride. Neither spoke, but both understood the significance of this moment. Whoever broke first would likely lose not just the head-to-head battle, but any chance of breaking 3 hours. For nearly a full mile, they ran together in the desert, their footsteps synchronized, their breathing labored but controlled. Maya drew strength from the competition, while simultaneously feeling the additional pressure it created. Breaking the course record was no longer just about personal achievement, it was about proving herself against a direct challenger who clearly believed he could outkick her in the final miles. The decisive moment came at mile 23.5. Davis surged, opening a gap of 10 meters that felt like 10 miles. Maya's initial instinct was to respond immediately, to match his acceleration and prove she couldn't be dropped. But her tactical mind intervened. Instead of panicking, Maya did something that went against every competitive instinct. She let him go. She maintained her pace, trusted her preparation, and waited to see if Davis could sustain his surge for the final 2.7 miles. Her gamble was based on a simple calculation. If he was pushing beyond his sustainable pace now, he would pay for it later. Mile 24 confirmed Maya's strategy. Davis's gap had stopped growing and was actually beginning to shrink. His surge had been powerful but unsustainable, and Maya could see the effects of his tactical error in his changing stride pattern. She was reeling him in without having to dig into her own final reserves. With 2 miles remaining, Maya retook the lead. Davis tried to respond but couldn't match her acceleration. More importantly, Maya realized that she still had energy left. Not much, but enough to potentially push the pace even higher in the final mile. The 25-mile marker was both a celebration and a moment of reckoning. Her split time showed 2:52:16, which meant she needed to cover the final 1.2 miles in 7:44 to break 3 hours. The mathematics were daunting, but achievable if she could find one more level. This was where Maya's months of preparation crystallized into something approaching magic. Instead of the gradual deterioration that characterized most endurance efforts, she began to run faster. Her stride lengthened, her breathing steadied, and her pace dropped to levels she hadn't sustained since the early miles. Behind her, Davis was no longer a factor. The desert had claimed several more competitors, leaving Maya effectively alone for the final mile. But she wasn't really alone. She carried with her the memory of every person who had doubted her, every instructor who had predicted her failure, every moment when she had questioned her own capabilities. The final mile became a celebration of human potential. Maya's pace dropped below 6 minutes per mile for the first time in the entire race. Spectators who had gathered at various points along the final stretch began cheering as word spread that a new course record was within reach. With half a mile remaining, Maya could see the finish line in the distance. A small crowd had gathered, including Captain Williams, Colonel Martinez, and what appeared to be several officers she didn't recognize. The timing clock was visible from 400 meters away, showing 2:57:43 and counting upward with each second. The final 400 meters were pure will. Maya's vision had narrowed to tunnel focus, her hearing muffled by the pounding of her heart and the rhythmic slapping of her boots on the desert floor. The 62 pounds on her back felt weightless, transformed by adrenaline and determination into something that propelled rather than hindered her progress. 200 meters, 2:58:20. 100 meters, 2:58:35. 50 meters, 2:58:45. Maya Rodriguez crossed the finish line at exactly 2:58:47, shattering the previous course record by over 3 minutes. She had become not just the first woman to break 3 hours, but the fastest person in the history of the challenge. As she collapsed to her knees, the weight of her achievements settling over her like the desert heat, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the recruit who couldn't complete a single pull-up to the soldier who had just redefined what was possible, every doubt, every setback, every small victory had led to this singular moment of triumph. Colonel Martinez approached with the official time slip, his expression mixing disbelief with profound respect. "Rodriguez," he said, "I've been in the Army for 28 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what you just accomplished." Maya looked up at him, still catching her breath, still processing the reality of what had just happened. "Sir, I just wanted to see what was possible." "Well," Martinez replied, "I think you found out." The medical tent was buzzing with activity. As Maya sat on an examination table, an IV drip slowly rehydrating her depleted system. Dr. Sarah Chen, the battalion's chief medical officer, monitored her vital signs with the intensity of someone who had seen too many soldiers push themselves beyond safe limits. "Heart rate's coming down nicely," Dr. Chen observed, checking Maya's pulse for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "Blood pressure's stable. How's your vision? Any dizziness or nausea?" "Vision's clear, Doc. No nausea. I feel actually incredible." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Rodriguez, you just completed what should have been a physiologically impossible task. Your body burned approximately 4,200 calories in under 3 hours, while losing nearly 6 pounds of fluid through sweat. You should feel like you've been hit by a truck." But Maya didn't feel destroyed. Exhausted, yes. Depleted, certainly. But underneath the physical fatigue was an electric energy she'd never experienced before. It was as if the race had unlocked something fundamental about herself, something that would permanently change how she understood herself. Outside the medical tent, word of Maya's record was spreading through the base with the speed of wildfire. Soldiers who had been finishing their morning PT stopped to stare at the official results board, where her time was posted in bold numbers, 2:58:47. Support staff gathered in small groups discussing the implications of what had just happened. Even veteran non-commissioned officers who had seen decades of exceptional performances were struggling to process the magnitude of Maya's achievement. Captain Williams found Maya in the medical tent 90 minutes after she'd finished. His expression was a mixture of pride, amazement, and something approaching disbelief. "Rodriguez, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Yes, sir. Did you have any idea you were capable of this when you signed up for that challenge?" Maya considered the question carefully. "No, sir. I thought I might be able to finish in under 4 hours if everything went perfectly. I never imagined this." Williams nodded slowly. "I've been making some calls since you finished. There are people who need to know about what happened here today. People at levels considerably higher than battalion command." Before Maya could ask what he meant, Colonel Martinez entered the tent with 2 officers she didn't recognize. Both wore dress uniforms indicating ranks well above anything she'd normally encounter. The taller of the 2, a woman with silver eagles on her collar, introduced herself as Colonel Patricia Hayes from the Pentagon's Human Performance Division.
Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm here because what you accomplished today has implications beyond just setting a local record. We've been monitoring performance metrics across all branches of the military, looking for exceptional individuals who might be candidates for specialized programs. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Specialized programs, ma'am. The Army is developing new roles that require extreme physical and mental capabilities, roles that push the boundaries of what we previously thought possible for human performance in combat situations. Your time today suggests you might possess the genetic and psychological markers we're looking for. The second officer, whose uniform indicated special operations background, stepped forward. "Rodriguez, how much do you know about the Army's new high-altitude reconnaissance program?" "Nothing, sir. I've never heard of it." "That's because it's classified at levels well above your current clearance. But I can tell you this, the physical requirements make today's marathon look like a warm-up exercise. We're talking about operations at altitudes where most people can barely function, carrying equipment loads that would crush normal soldiers, over distances and terrain that exist at the very edge of human capability." Colonel Hayes opened a tablet and showed Maya a series of graphs and data points. "Your performance metrics from today indicate several things that are extremely rare in the general population. Your VO2 max, the maximum amount of oxygen your body can utilize during exercise, is off the charts. Your lactate threshold is in the 99th percentile. Most importantly, your ability to maintain cognitive function under extreme physical stress is something we see in less than 1% of elite athletes." Maya stared at the data, trying to process what she was being told. "Ma'am, are you saying that today was some kind of test?" "No, Rodriguez. Today, you are testing yourself, but the results have caught the attention of people who develop the most challenging missions our military undertakes. The question now is whether you're interested in finding out just how far your capabilities extend." Dr. Chen, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, interjected with a medical perspective. "Colonel Hayes, with respect, what Staff Sergeant Rodriguez accomplished today pushed her to the absolute limits of human endurance. Are you suggesting there are missions that require even more?" "Doctor, there are threats facing our nation that require capabilities we're still learning how to develop. Traditional military training produces excellent soldiers, but there are situations where excellence isn't enough. We need individuals who can perform at superhuman levels when the stakes are highest." Maya's mind raced through the implications. Everything she had worked for, proving herself, overcoming limitations, discovering her potential, had led to this moment. But the conversation was moving into territory she hadn't expected. "What would this mean for my current training, my assignment?" Colonel Hayes consulted her tablet again. If you're selected for the program, you'd be reassigned to a specialized training facility. The program is 18 months long and has a completion rate of approximately 30%. Those who complete it become part of an elite unit that handles missions other soldiers can't attempt. And if I'm not interested? Then you continue your current path, which, based on today's performance, will undoubtedly be distinguished. But Rodriguez, opportunities like this don't come along often. We've been tracking military athletes for 3 years, and you're only the 4th person to demonstrate the combination of physical and mental attributes we're looking for. The weight of the decision settled over Maya like her combat pack had that morning. Significant, but not insurmountable. She thought about her father's military service, about the conversation where he'd asked her why she was really pursuing the endurance challenge. The answer that had come to her that morning was about discovering her absolute potential. Now she was being offered a chance to explore capabilities she hadn't even known existed. Ma'am, I need to understand something. You're talking about missions that push beyond normal human limits. Are we talking about operations where soldiers might not come home? Colonel Hayes's expression became deadly serious. Rodriguez, every military operation carries that risk. But yes, the missions we're discussing involve variables and challenges that multiply those risks significantly. However, they also involve protecting interests and saving lives in situations where conventional forces simply cannot operate effectively. Maya looked around the medical tent, at Dr. Chen, who was watching her with maternal concern, at Captain Williams, whose pride in her achievement was evident, at the 2 high-ranking officers who represented a future she couldn't fully imagine. 6 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she could break 3 hours in a desert marathon. Now she was being recruited for programs that existed at the intersection of human performance and national security. How long do I have to decide? 72 hours, the Special Operations Officer replied. But Rodriguez, I want you to understand something. What you did today wasn't just about running fast or being tough. You demonstrated the ability to make tactical decisions under extreme stress, to manage resources over extended operations, and to push through barriers that stop other people. Those aren't just physical attributes, they're leadership qualities that can't be taught. As the officers prepared to leave, Colonel Hayes handed Maya a secure communication device. If you decide you're interested, use this to contact me directly. If not, your performance today has already guaranteed that doors will open for you throughout your military career. Either way, the Army is proud to have soldiers like you. After they left, Maya sat in the medical tent with Dr. Chen and Captain Williams, the magnitude of the morning's events slowly sinking in. In the span of 6 hours, she had gone from being a soldier trying to prove herself to being recruited for programs she hadn't known existed. "What do you think, Rodriguez?" Captain Williams asked. "This is beyond anything we discussed when you first enlisted." "Sir, I honestly don't know what to think. This morning I was focused on running 26 miles. Now I'm hearing about missions that make that look easy." Dr. Chen checked Maya's IV one final time before removing it. "From a medical perspective, what you accomplished today suggests that your body is capable of extraordinary things. But Rodriguez, capability and wisdom are different qualities. Just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should." Maya nodded, appreciating the doctor's perspective. "Doc, when you were monitoring my vitals during the race, did you see anything that concerned you? Honestly, I was prepared to pull you from the course at mile 20 when your core temperature spiked, but somehow you managed to regulate it naturally. Your body seems to have adaptive mechanisms that I don't fully understand. It's fascinating from a research standpoint, but it also suggests that you might be capable of performances that even today's record doesn't reflect." The thought was both thrilling and sobering. Maya had pushed herself to what she thought were her absolute limits, only to discover that there might be reserves she hadn't even accessed. That evening, Maya called home to share the news of her record with her family. Her mother answered the phone with obvious excitement. News of Maya's achievement had somehow reached them before her call. "Mija, we heard from Captain Williams' office. A marathon in under 3 hours with full military gear? Maya, that's impossible." "Apparently not, Mom. But that's not the only news." Maya explained the afternoon's recruitment conversation, carefully omitting any classified details while conveying the significance of the opportunity. Her parents' reactions were predictably mixed. "This sounds dangerous, Maya," her mother said immediately. "More dangerous than what you're already doing." Her father's response was more measured. "What does your gut tell you?" "That I need to find out what I'm really capable of. Today showed me that my limits aren't where I thought they were. This program might show me where they actually are." "And you think that's important?" Maya thought about the question. "Dad, you served in Afghanistan. You saw combat. Did you ever wish you had been better prepared, stronger, faster, more capable? Every day. Then you understand why I need to explore this." The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical concerns about the timeline, the risks, and the potential benefits. By the end, both parents had expressed their support, though their worry was obvious. Over the next 2 days, Maya researched everything she could about elite military programs and human performance research. She spoke with instructors, with fellow soldiers, and with medical personnel. Everyone had opinions, but nobody could make the decision for her. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Sergeant First Class Davis, the soldier she had battled during the final miles of the race. He found her in the dining facility on her second evening of deliberation. "Rodriguez, I heard about the recruitment offer. Mind if I ask what you're thinking?" "Honestly, Sergeant, I'm torn. This is an incredible opportunity, but it's also completely unknown territory." Davis nodded thoughtfully. "Can I tell you something about yesterday's race? When you let me pass you at mile 23, I thought I had you beat. I figured you'd crack mentally and I'd cruise to the finish. But when you caught me again and then started pulling away, I realized something." "What's that?" "You weren't just physically stronger than me, you were tactically smarter. You made a decision under extreme pressure that went against every competitive instinct, and that was the right decision. That's not something that can be trained. That's something you either have or you don't." Maya appreciated his perspective, but she was still wrestling with the magnitude of the decision. "Do you think I should take it?" "Rodriguez, I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night knowing you didn't leave anything on the table. Yesterday, you found out you could run faster than anyone thought possible. Maybe this program will show you what else is possible." On the morning of the third day, Maya made her decision. She activated the secure communication device Colonel Hayes had given her and requested a callback. The response came within minutes. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, this is Colonel Hayes. Have you made your decision?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm interested in the program." "Outstanding. Report to Building 847 at 0000 tomorrow for your initial briefing and medical evaluation." "Rodriguez?" "Yes, ma'am." "What you accomplished in that desert was just the beginning. Get ready to discover what you're really made of." As Maya ended the call, she felt the same electric energy that had carried her through the final miles of the marathon. She was about to embark on a journey that would push her beyond anything she had previously imagined. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The girl who had been told she'd never make it was about to find out just how far making it could go. The transport helicopter descended through morning clouds toward a facility that didn't exist on any public maps. Maya pressed her face to the small window, watching as the Nevada desert gave way to mountainous terrain she'd never seen before. The landscape below was harsh and unforgiving, exactly the kind of environment where limits would be tested and exceeded. Building 847 had turned out to be a departure point rather than a destination. After 18 hours of medical testing, psychological evaluation, and security clearance processing, Maya found herself on a flight to what her escorts referred to only as the installation. The 3 other passengers were equally mysterious. 2 men and 1 woman, all around her age, all carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of elite athletes. The woman sitting across from Maya had introduced herself simply as Kim during their brief conversation before takeoff. Her handshake had revealed calluses that spoke of serious climbing experience, and her eyes held the focused intensity Maya recognized in herself after months of pushing physical boundaries.
First time to the installation?
Kim asked as the helicopter began its final approach. First time anywhere like this, Maya replied honestly. You? Third trip. I washed out twice before they finally accepted me into the program. Kim's tone held no shame, only matter-of-fact determination. Turns out there's a difference between being exceptional and being ready to be exceptional. The landing pad was carved into solid rock, surrounded by peaks that stretched toward a sky so blue it looked artificial. Maya counted at least 6 other helicopters on the pad, suggesting that recruitment was an ongoing process. As she gathered her gear and stepped onto the tarmac, the altitude hit her immediately. They were significantly higher than the Nevada training base, high enough that the air felt thin in her lungs. A lean man in unmarked fatigues approached their group. No rank insignia, no name tape, just the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. "Welcome to Phase 1, he said without preamble. "I'm Instructor Walsh. For the next 6 weeks, this facility will test everything you think you know about your capabilities. Some of you will advance to Phase 2. Most of you will not. Those who don't advance will return to your units with no record of this program in your files." Maya felt her pulse quicken. Phase 1, 6 weeks. The casual mention of failure rates suggested that her record-breaking marathon had been merely a qualifying event, not a guarantee of success. Walsh led them through a security checkpoint more thorough than anything Maya had experienced, including biometric scanning and equipment inspection that cataloged every piece of gear down to individual buttons. Beyond security lay a complex that defied easy description. Part military base, part research facility, part something else entirely. The installation operates on principles you won't find in standard military doctrine, Walsh explained as they walked through corridors lined with equipment Maya didn't recognize. Traditional training pushes soldiers to the limits of normal human performance. We're interested in what lies beyond those limits. They passed laboratories where technicians monitored screens displaying complex physiological data. Through observation windows, Maya glimpsed other trainees engaged in exercises that looked more like experiments than training. Soldiers carrying enormous loads up vertical walls, individuals performing complex cognitive tasks while subjected to environmental stresses that should have made concentration impossible. "Your barracks assignments are based on your initial assessments," Walsh continued, handing each of them key cards. "Rodriguez, you're in the Delta section with the endurance specialists. Kim, Charlie section with the climbing group. Your first evaluation begins at 500 tomorrow. I suggest you use the remaining daylight to familiarize yourself with the facility." Maya's room was spartanly furnished, but included equipment she'd never seen before. Monitoring devices that resembled medical equipment, a computer terminal with access to training programs that analyzed everything from sleep patterns to nutritional absorption rates. Most intriguingly, there was a detailed schedule showing her activities for the next 6 weeks, including sessions labeled with terms like hypoxic conditioning, metabolic optimization, and cognitive load training. That evening, she explored the facility's common areas and met other trainees. The demographics were unlike anything she'd encountered in traditional military settings. Ages ranged from early 20s to late 30s. Some had backgrounds in special operations, others came from conventional units like herself. A few had been recruited directly from civilian careers, including a former Olympic marathoner and a mountain rescue specialist who held altitude climbing records. The common thread wasn't military experience or even physical capability. It was performance under conditions that pushed beyond normal human limits. Every person she spoke with had a story of accomplishing something that experts had deemed impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Maya learned her full name and rank during dinner, had been recruited after successfully completing a solo mountain rescue at 19,000 feet altitude, carrying an injured climber for 12 hours through terrain that should have killed them both. The Olympic marathoner, now Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, had been recruited after breaking the world record while running with pneumonia that should have hospitalized him. Each story reinforced the same theme. Normal human limitations seemed not to apply to the people gathered at the installation. The scary part, Kim explained over evening chow, isn't what they expect us to do. It's that they seem to know we can do it before we know it ourselves. Maya's first evaluation began before dawn with a wake-up call that wasn't a call at all. Her room's environmental controls shifted to simulate altitude sickness while simultaneously increasing the temperature to desert levels. She found herself fully alert and functioning within minutes, her body automatically adapting to conditions that should have left her disoriented and nauseous. Instructor Walsh was waiting in the corridor with a pack that dwarfed anything Maya had carried during her marathon. "Today, we'd establish your baseline capabilities," he said. 43 miles through mountain terrain, elevation gain of 8,400 feet, carrying 87 pounds of gear. Expected completion time for elite performers is 14 hours. Maya hefted the pack, feeling its weight distribute across her frame. 87 pounds was nearly 40% more than her marathon load, and the distance was almost 70% longer. But as she adjusted the straps and found her balance, she realized something unexpected. The weight felt manageable. "Sir, what's the current record for this course?" Walsh consulted his tablet. 11 hours, 37 minutes. Set last year by a Navy SEAL who's now part of our operational teams. But Rodriguez, today isn't about setting records. Today is about seeing how your body responds to sustained performance at altitude under load. The course began at 6,200 feet altitude and wound through terrain that seemed designed by someone with a grudge against human locomotion. Loose scree that shifted underfoot, sustained climbs that required both cardiovascular fitness and technical skill. Descent sections steep enough that controlling speed became a survival skill rather than a pacing strategy. But something remarkable happened as Maya settled into the rhythm of the movement. Instead of the gradual degradation she expected, her performance seemed to stabilize at a level higher than she'd achieved during her marathon. Her breathing found an efficient pattern despite the thin air. Her legs adapted to the constant elevation changes. Most importantly, her mind remained clear and tactical, even as the physical demands mounted. By mile 20, Maya realized she wasn't just completing the course, she was excelling at it. Her pace had been consistently faster than the 14-hour target, and she felt stronger than she had at the same relative point during her marathon. The additional weight, rather than slowing her down, seemed to provide stability and momentum that enhanced her efficiency. Walsh appeared at the 30-mile checkpoint, his expression unreadable as he recorded her split time. 9 hours, 12 minutes. How are you feeling, Rodriguez? Strong, sir. Stronger than I expected. Good, because the final 13 miles include a section we call the crucible. It's where we separate candidates who are physically capable from candidates who can operate beyond normal human parameters. The crucible began innocently enough, a gradual climb through pine forest that seemed almost gentle compared to the earlier terrain. But as Maya gained elevation, the nature of the challenge became clear. The final 5 miles occurred above 11,000 feet, where oxygen levels dropped to roughly 60% of sea level concentrations. Most people couldn't function effectively at that altitude without acclimatization. Maya was expected to maintain race pace while carrying nearly 90 pounds of gear. The physiological stress was unlike anything she'd experienced. Her heart rate spiked as her body fought to extract oxygen from the thin air. Her vision began to narrow at the edges, and she could feel the early symptoms of altitude sickness creeping in. But rather than slowing down or becoming disoriented, Maya found herself accessing mental resources she developed during her marathon training. She broke the final miles into micro-segments, focusing on technical execution rather than the broader challenge. Her engineering background helped her optimize her breathing pattern, her stride efficiency, and her energy expenditure. Most crucially, she maintained the analytical thinking that allowed her to make tactical decisions even as her body approached its limits. The finish line appeared through morning mist at 11,000 feet elevation, a simple checkpoint manned by medical personnel and timing officials. Maya crossed it at exactly 10 hours 58 minutes, breaking the previous record by nearly 40 minutes while completing her first exposure to the installation's training protocols. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the installation's lead physiologist, was waiting with monitoring equipment that immediately began recording Maya's vital signs. Rodriguez, I need you to perform a series of cognitive tasks while we assess your recovery pattern. The cognitive testing was more challenging than the physical exertion had been. While her body processed the altitude stress and gear weight, Maya was required to solve complex mathematical problems, analyze tactical scenarios, and demonstrate reaction times that would be considered excellent under normal conditions. The fact that she completed these tasks successfully while her body was still processing extreme physical stress indicated capabilities that went beyond simple endurance. Remarkable, Dr. Santos muttered as she reviewed the data. Your oxygen saturation levels suggest significant altitude stress, but your cognitive performance shows no degradation. Your lactate levels indicate sustained high-intensity effort, but your heart rate variability suggests excellent autonomic recovery. Rodriguez, have you ever been tested for genetic markers associated with extreme altitude performance? No, ma'am. I didn't know such markers existed. There are genetic variants that affect everything from oxygen utilization efficiency to lactate buffering capacity. We'll run those tests this week, but your performance today suggests you may possess several rare variants that are extremely valuable for high-altitude operations. That evening, Maya called home using the installation's secure communication system. Her parents' voices carried across the encrypted connection with a mixture of pride and concern that had become familiar. "How's the training, Mija?" her father asked. "Different than anything I expected, Dad. They're not just testing physical capabilities, they're testing how the mind and body work together under extreme conditions. Are you learning things that will keep you safe?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I'm learning things about myself that I never knew existed. Whether that makes me safer or puts me in more dangerous situations, I honestly don't know yet." Her mother's voice carried maternal worry. "Maya, you sound tired." "I am tired, Mom, but it's very tiring. It's the tiredness that comes from discovering you're capable of more than you thought possible." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering family news and practical concerns. But Maya found herself unable to fully explain what was happening at the installation. How do you describe training that pushes beyond normal human limits to people who love you and want you to be safe? That night, as Maya reviewed her performance data and prepared for the next day's challenges, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she'd been struggling to complete basic training requirements. 3 months ago, she'd been surprised by her own progress in advanced infantry training. 2 weeks ago, she'd set a record that established her as an exceptional athlete. Now, she was training for missions that exist at the intersection of human potential and national security, working with people who had redefined what was possible in their respective fields. Each phase of her development had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, and each revelation had opened doors to challenges she couldn't have imagined. As she drifted off to sleep in her Spartan room, surrounded by monitoring equipment that would track her recovery patterns throughout the night, Maya realized that her journey was no longer about proving doubters wrong. It had evolved into something much more significant, discovering the absolute limits of human potential and then figuring out how to operate beyond them. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and new opportunities to push past barriers that most people never even approached. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at the installation, Maya felt completely certain that she belonged here, not because the training was easy, but because she was finally operating at a level that matched her true capabilities. The girl who had been told she'd never make it was about to discover that making it was only the beginning of what was possible. 3 weeks into Phase 1, Maya discovered that breaking records was the easy part. The real challenge lay in something the instructors called operational synthesis, the ability to maintain peak performance across multiple disciplines simultaneously while under conditions that would incapacitate normal humans. The morning began at 0330 with what Dr. Santos euphemistically termed environmental adaptation training. Maya found herself in a chamber that could simulate any climate on Earth, currently configured to replicate the atmospheric conditions of a Himalayan peak at 18,000 feet. The oxygen concentration was so low that every breath required conscious effort, yet she was expected to maintain normal cognitive function while solving complex tactical problems.
Rodriguez, your target is moving through a simulated urban environment. Instructor Walsh's voice crackled through the chamber's communication system. You have limited ammunition, an unknown civilian population, and intelligence suggests chemical weapons may be present. Plan your approach. The tactical scenario unfolded on screens around the chamber while Maya's body fought against the hypoxic conditions. Her heart rate had spiked to 160 beats per minute just from the altitude simulation, but her mind remained analytically sharp. She identified 3 potential approach routes, calculated ammunition requirements, and developed contingency plans for chemical weapon deployment, all while her oxygen saturation levels hovered at readings that should have left her barely conscious. This was the installation's true innovation, training soldiers to operate at peak mental performance while their bodies experienced extreme physical stress. Traditional military training separated these elements, building physical fitness in one context and tactical thinking in another. The installation's approach integrated them, creating operators who could make life or death decisions while their bodies were pushed beyond normal human limits. Excellent tactical analysis, Walsh observed as Maya completed the scenario. Your accuracy remained consistent despite hypoxic stress equivalent to climbing Everest without supplemental oxygen. But now we add the physical component. The chamber's configuration shifted, introducing a treadmill system that required Maya to maintain running pace while continuing the tactical exercise. The physical demand was brutal, running at high intensity while oxygen-starved, but Maya discovered something remarkable. Instead of her cognitive performance degrading under the additional stress, it seemed to sharpen. The extreme physical challenge somehow enhanced her mental focus. This is unusual, Dr. Santos commented from the observation room. Most subjects show significant cognitive degradation when we combine hypoxic stress with high-intensity exercise. Rodriguez, you're actually solving problems faster now than you were under hypoxic conditions alone. The realization was as significant as it was unexpected. Maya's brain seemed to function most efficiently when her body was under extreme stress, as if the physical challenge unlocked mental resources that remained dormant under normal conditions. This phenomenon, Dr. Santos later explained, occurred in less than 2% of the population and was considered one of the most valuable traits for extreme operations. After the environmental chamber, Maya proceeded to weapons training that redefined what she thought she knew about marksmanship. The course required her to engage targets at distances up to 800 meters while carrying a full combat load, but with a twist that made traditional sniper training look elementary. Each shot had to be taken while performing complex physical movements, climbing, rappelling, or moving through obstacle courses that demanded absolute body control. Master Sergeant Rebecca Torres, the installation's weapons instructor, had been skeptical when Maya arrived for her first precision shooting evaluation. Rodriguez, I've reviewed your basic marksmanship scores. They're adequate for infantry work, but what we do here requires surgical precision under conditions that would make most expert marksmen miss a barn. The first exercise seemed designed to prove Torres's point. Maya was required to climb a 60-foot rope while carrying her rifle, establish a shooting position at the top, and engage 5 targets at varying distances within a 30-second time window. The physical exertion of the climb should have made steady aim impossible, yet Maya found herself adapting to the challenge with surprising ease. Her first shot, taken while her heart rate was still elevated from the climb, hit dead center at 400 meters. The second, engaged while adjusting her position on the unstable platform, struck the target's center ring at 600 meters. By the 5th shot, Torres was staring at the spotting scope with an expression that mixed disbelief with professional excitement. Rodriguez, run that sequence again. I need to verify those results. Maya's second attempt was even more accurate than her first. Her groupings tightened, her target acquisition time improved, and most remarkably, her precision seemed to increase as the physical demands mounted. Torres later explained that Maya was demonstrating what sports psychologists called flow state under stress, a condition where extreme physical demand enhanced rather than degraded fine motor control. In 23 years of advanced weapons training, I've seen 3 people who could shoot like this under physical stress.
Two of them are currently leading our most sensitive operations. The third holds the record for longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. But Maya's most significant breakthrough came during team integration exercises in week 4. Until this point, her training had focused on individual capabilities: how far she could run, how much weight she could carry, how accurately she could shoot under stress. Team integration tested something more complex: her ability to enhance group performance while operating at her own peak capacity. The exercise paired Maya with Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, a veteran special operations officer who served as both teammate and evaluator. Their mission was to infiltrate a simulated enemy compound, gather intelligence, and extract without detection, all while carrying surveillance equipment that weighed 40 pounds per person and operating at altitudes that left most people struggling to walk normally. Rodriguez, this isn't about individual heroics. Elite teams succeed because every member makes every other member more capable. Your job is to demonstrate that your exceptional individual abilities translate into exceptional team performance. The infiltration began at midnight across terrain that would have challenged experienced mountaineers even in daylight. Maya and Mitchell had to traverse 3 miles of rocky, uneven ground while maintaining complete noise discipline and carrying equipment loads that would have exhausted normal soldiers before they reached the objective. Maya's role was primarily navigation and pace setting, using her endurance capabilities to maintain mission timeline while ensuring Mitchell could operate effectively. What Maya discovered was that her individual abilities could indeed enhance team performance, but only if she understood how to modulate them appropriately. Her natural pace would have left Mitchell struggling to keep up, compromising both stealth and tactical effectiveness. Instead, she learned to set a rhythm that pushed Mitchell to his optimal performance level while operating well within her own capabilities, creating reserve capacity she could deploy if the mission required it. The compound infiltration required different skills entirely. Maya and Mitchell had to scale a 15-foot wall, disable security systems, photograph sensitive documents, and extract without triggering alarms.
"Watch my movements," Mitchell whispered as they approached the wall. "Your job is to match my timing exactly, not to show how fast you can climb." Maya found this mental adjustment more challenging than any physical obstacle she'd encountered. Her instinct was to lead, to set the pace, to push the boundaries of what was possible. Team operations required her to sublimate those instincts in service of collective success, to use her capabilities as tools for enhancing group performance rather than individual achievement. The breakthrough came during their extraction. Mitchell stumbled while navigating the rocky terrain in darkness, twisting his ankle severely enough that normal movement became impossible. Under these conditions, most teams would abort the mission or call for extraction support. Maya saw a different solution. "Sir, I can carry both our equipment loads plus provide support for your movement. We can complete the extraction on schedule." Mitchell's expression was skeptical. "Rodriguez, that's 60 pounds of gear plus assisting my movement across 3 miles of difficult terrain. You'd be operating at the very edge of human capability." "Sir, that's exactly where I operate best." Maya redistributed their equipment loads, taking Mitchell's 40-pound pack in addition to her own, while also providing physical support for his injured ankle. The resulting load exceeded anything she'd carried during training, and assisting Mitchell's movement required her to adjust her natural stride and balance patterns continuously. But rather than feeling overwhelmed by the additional demands, Maya experienced the same mental clarity that had emerged during her most challenging individual exercises. The extraction took 4 hours across terrain that should have required 6 hours, even with both team members fully functional. Maya maintained perfect navigation while managing the complex physical demands of carrying double equipment loads and assisting Mitchell's movement. Most importantly, she sustained tactical awareness throughout the operation, remaining alert for threats and maintaining mission security even while operating at extreme physical capacity. "Rodriguez," Mitchell said as they reached the extraction point exactly on schedule, "I've been in special operations for 16 years. I've worked with Rangers, SEALs, Delta Force, and operators from programs most people don't know exist.
What you just demonstrated is beyond anything I've seen from individual soldiers. But Mitchell's praise came with a qualifier that would prove prophetic. The question now is whether you can do that consistently under operational conditions where failure means more than just returning to your previous assignment. Dr. Santo's medical evaluation after the team exercise revealed data that reinforced the significance of Maya's performance. Her physiological markers during the extraction showed stress levels that would normally result in significant performance degradation. Yet her cognitive and physical output had remained not just stable, but actually enhanced under the additional load. Rodriguez, we're seeing patterns in your data that we've only observed in one other subject in the program's 3-year history, Dr. Santos explained while reviewing the results. Your body seems to access additional resources under extreme stress rather than becoming depleted by it. From a medical perspective, this suggests genetic and physiological adaptations that are extraordinarily rare. Ma'am, does this mean I'm ready for Phase 2? Dr. Santos paused, consulting her tablet before responding. It means you're demonstrating capabilities that exceed our Phase 1 evaluation criteria. But Rodriguez, Phase 2 isn't just about individual performance. It's about applying these abilities to real-world operations where the stakes are measured in lives rather than training scores. That evening, Maya received orders to report to Instructor Walsh's office for what the message termed advancement consultation. The walk through the installation's corridors felt different now. She recognized more faces, understood more of the equipment and procedures, felt like she belonged in an environment that had initially seemed impossibly demanding. Walsh's office was spartanly furnished but included maps of regions Maya didn't recognize and photographs of operations that clearly fell outside normal military parameters. Walsh himself looked tired in a way that suggested he'd been making difficult decisions about multiple candidates. Rodriguez, you've completed Phase 1 in 4 weeks rather than the standard 6. Your performance metrics exceed our advancement criteria in every category we measure. Under normal circumstances, you proceed directly to Phase 2. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Sir, these don't sound like normal circumstances. They're not. We've received tasking for an operation that requires immediate deployment of our most capable available asset. The mission parameters fall within your demonstrated capabilities, but it would mean skipping Phase 2 training and moving directly to operational assignment. Walsh handed Maya a folder marked with classification levels she'd never seen before. This is entirely voluntary, Rodriguez. You can proceed to Phase 2 as scheduled and deploy with your training cohort in 18 months. Or you can accept immediate operational assignment to a mission that requires exactly the combination of individual capability and team integration you've demonstrated. Maya opened the folder, scanning mission parameters that pushed even her expanded understanding of what was possible. High-altitude insertion into contested territory, extended operations without resupply, intelligence gathering that required infiltration of installations considered impenetrable by conventional forces. The physical and mental demands would exceed anything she'd experienced, even during her most challenging training. But as she read the operational details, Maya felt the same electric anticipation that had carried her through the marathon finish line and every breakthrough since. This wasn't just an opportunity to test her limits. It was a chance to use her capabilities for something that mattered beyond personal achievement. Sir, how long do I have to decide? 6 hours, Walsh replied. The insertion window opens tomorrow night. Maya looked at the mission folder, then at Walsh, then back at the folder. 6 months ago, she'd been a soldier trying to prove she belonged. Now she was being offered the opportunity to lead a mission that would test everything she'd discovered about her own potential.
Sir, I accept. The helicopter insertion occurred at 23,000 feet over the Hindu Kush Mountains in conditions that would have grounded any conventional aircraft. Maya stood at the edge of the open door, her oxygen mask fogging with each breath, watching terrain that looked more like an alien planet than anything on Earth. Below her stretched 40 miles of vertical rock faces, glaciated valleys, and weather patterns that could kill exposed humans within minutes.
Her partner for this mission was Captain Elena Vasquez, a combat veteran whose own recruitment story involved surviving 14 days behind enemy lines after her unit was ambushed in Syria. Vasquez had completed the full 18-month program and had been specifically requested for this operation based on her experience with high-altitude insertions in contested territory. "Rodriguez, remember that everything changes once we're on the ground," Vasquez said through the helicopter's communication system. "Training exercises have safety nets and extraction protocols. Out there, we succeed or we don't come home." The mission parameters were as complex as they were dangerous. Intelligence had identified a weapons facility built into a mountain complex at 19,000 feet altitude, higher than most civilian aircraft could operate. The facility was reportedly developing chemical weapons with capabilities that could shift the balance of power in multiple regional conflicts. Conventional military assault was impossible due to the altitude, terrain, and defensive systems. Satellite surveillance was limited by weather and the facility's underground construction. Maya and Vasquez had 72 hours to infiltrate the complex, gather photographic evidence of the weapons development, and extract with intelligence that could prevent catastrophic deployment of the chemical weapons. They would carry no backup communication beyond emergency beacons, operate without resupply, and face environmental conditions that pushed human survival to its absolute limits. 30 seconds to insertion, the helicopter pilot announced. Maya checked her gear one final time. Specialized mountaineering equipment rated for extreme altitude, cameras and surveillance devices hardened against temperature extremes, weapons configured for operation in sub-zero conditions, and enough high-calorie rations to sustain 2 people for 4 days if the extraction was delayed. The jump itself was unlike anything Maya had experienced during training. The helicopter couldn't hover at insertion altitude due to air density limitations, requiring Maya and Vasquez to exit during a carefully timed flyover of their landing zone. They fell through air so thin that their parachutes barely functioned, touching down on a narrow ledge that provided the only viable access to the target facility. Maya's first breath on the ground sent ice crystals through her lungs. The ambient temperature was -37 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that exposed skin would suffer frostbite within minutes. More significantly, the altitude meant that every physical effort required twice the energy it would at sea level, while the oxygen-starved environment made clear thinking a constant challenge. "Rodriguez, how are you feeling?" Vasquez asked as they secured their equipment and prepared for the approach to the facility. "Cold, but functional," Maya replied, though she was privately amazed by how well her body was adapting to conditions that should have left her barely mobile. Her heart rate had stabilized despite the altitude, her breathing had found an efficient rhythm, and most importantly, her mind remained tactically sharp despite the environmental stress. The approach to the facility required 6 hours of technical mountaineering across terrain that would have challenged expert climbers under ideal conditions. Maya and Vasquez had to traverse ice fields where a single mistake meant falling thousands of feet, navigate rock faces slick with frozen condensation, and maintain operational security while moving through areas potentially monitored by the facility's defensive systems. Maya's endurance training proved invaluable, but in ways she hadn't anticipated. Rather than simply allowing her to maintain pace over long distances, her conditioning enabled her to perform technical climbing movements efficiently while carrying the heavy equipment load. Her cardiovascular fitness meant she could make complex decisions about route selection and risk management even while her body was working near its maximum capacity. "Your navigation is exceptional," Vasquez observed during a brief rest stop 4 hours into their approach. "You're reading this terrain like you've climbed it before." "It's like solving engineering problems," Maya replied, studying the route ahead through binoculars. "Every section has optimal solutions if you can analyze the variables correctly." The facility itself was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Built into the mountain face at an altitude where most people couldn't function effectively, it was protected by natural barriers that made conventional assault impossible. The main entrance was accessible only via a narrow ledge system that provided clear fields of fire for defensive positions. Alternative access routes required technical climbing skills that eliminated 99% of potential infiltrators. But Maya and Vasquez weren't planning a conventional approach. Their insertion point provided access to ventilation systems that intelligence suggested connect to the facility's lower levels. The infiltration would require crawling through spaces barely large enough for human passage while carrying surveillance equipment and maintaining communication discipline that prevented detection. This is where your size becomes an advantage, Vasquez explained as they studied the facility through specialized optics. I can provide overwatch and communication support, but you're the only one small enough to navigate those ventilation systems effectively. Maya felt a familiar surge of anticipation. Throughout her military career, her physical size had been seen as a limitation to overcome. Now it was a tactical advantage that made the mission possible. The infiltration began at 0230 local time, when facility activity was at its lowest ebb. Maya entered the ventilation system through an intake port that required her to remove most of her cold weather gear, leaving her exposed to sub-zero temperatures while crawling through metal ducting that conducted cold like a refrigerator. The physical demands were extraordinary, maintaining forward movement through spaces that barely accommodated her shoulders while carrying 20 pounds of surveillance equipment and navigating by touch in complete darkness. But the most challenging aspect wasn't physical, it was operational. Every movement had to be completely silent to avoid detection by facility security. Every decision about route selection had to balance speed against stealth. Most critically, Maya had to maintain perfect spatial awareness to ensure she could find her way back to the extraction point even if facility alarms compromised her planned route. The surveillance objective was located in the facility's main laboratory, 3 levels below ground, and accessible only through ventilation shafts that required Maya to navigate vertical drops while controlling her equipment to prevent noise or damage. The laboratory itself exceeded the intelligence estimates in every significant way. Instead of experimental chemical weapons, Maya found herself photographing production facilities for biological agents that could devastate entire populations. The weapons weren't in development, they were in active production, with deployment schedules that suggest imminent use in multiple theaters of operation.
Maya's camera captured everything: production equipment, storage facilities, deployment systems, and most critically, documentation that identified target locations for the biological weapons. The intelligence she gathered would not just prevent one catastrophic attack, it would expose an entire network of facilities and operations that threatened global security. But as Maya prepared to begin her extraction, facility alarms began sounding throughout the complex. Her infiltration had been detected, possibly through thermal sensors that had identified her body heat in the ventilation systems. Within minutes, the facility would be locked down with security personnel searching every possible infiltration route. Vasquez, this is Rodriguez. I have the intelligence, but the facility is going to active security protocols. My planned extraction route is compromised. Vasquez's response crackled through Maya's earpiece. Rodriguez, I'm seeing movement throughout the facility. They're deploying search teams to all access points. You need to find an alternative extraction immediately. Maya studied the facility layout she'd memorized during mission planning, looking for options that hadn't been included in their primary or secondary extraction protocols. The ventilation system that had brought her into the facility was now being sealed by automatic security systems. The main entrance was obviously unusable, but there was a third option: a waste discharge system that connected to the facility's lower levels and emerged on the opposite side of the mountain. The waste system extraction would be brutal. Maya would have to crawl through drainage pipes filled with chemical runoff from the laboratory operations, emerge into sub-zero temperatures without proper cold weather gear, and then traverse 8 miles of alpine terrain to reach the extraction point where Vasquez was waiting. Vasquez, I'm going to attempt extraction through the waste discharge system. If I don't reach the primary extraction point within 6 hours, initiate emergency extraction protocols. Rodriguez, that system wasn't surveilled during mission planning. You'll be operating completely blind. I understand, but it's the only option that doesn't involve fighting through security teams. Maya's crawl through the waste discharge system was the most physically demanding experience of her military career. The pipes were filled with chemical runoff that burned her exposed skin and filled her lungs with vapors that should have incapacitated her within minutes.
The temperature was below freezing, causing the chemical mixture to form ice that she had to break through with her bare hands. Most challenging of all, the system included vertical drops and horizontal sections that required her to army crawl for hundreds of meters while maintaining complete silence to avoid detection. But Maya's body performed like a machine designed specifically for this challenge. Her cardiovascular conditioning meant she could maintain forward movement even while breathing toxic vapors. Her strength training enabled her to navigate the vertical sections while carrying her equipment load. Most importantly, her mental conditioning kept her focused on problem-solving rather than becoming overwhelmed by the extraordinary nature of her situation. The emergence from the waste system left Maya 8 miles from the extraction point across terrain that would challenge expert mountaineers under ideal conditions. She was inadequately clothed for the sub-zero temperatures, carrying sensitive intelligence that could not be damaged, and operating on a timeline that required her to maintain an average pace that most people couldn't achieve at sea level. Maya covered the 8 miles in 2 hours and 17 minutes, arriving at the extraction point ahead of schedule despite conditions that should have made movement impossible. Vasquez was waiting with emergency medical supplies and communication equipment to coordinate their helicopter extraction. "Rodriguez, you look like you've been through hell," Vasquez observed as she helped Maya into cold weather gear. "But you got the intelligence?" Maya handed over the camera equipment and surveillance data, her hands shaking from cold and exhaustion, but her mind still tactically sharp. "Everything is documented. Production facilities, deployment schedules, target locations, enough intelligence to shut down the entire network." The helicopter extraction occurred as dawn broke over the Hindu Kush Mountains, with Maya and Vasquez on board a specially configured aircraft that could operate at extreme altitude. As they gained distance from the target facility, Maya watched the mountain complex shrink below them and realized that she had just completed a mission that existed at the absolute edge of human capability. But the real significance became clear during the debriefing session at the installation. Colonel Hayes was present via secure video conference, along with officers Maya didn't recognize, representing agencies whose existence she couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. "Rodriguez, the intelligence you gathered has already resulted in operations that prevented biological weapons deployment in 3 separate conflicts. The mission you completed last week was considered impossible by conventional military planning. The fact that you not only succeeded but exceeded all operational objectives suggests capabilities that are strategically significant for national security." Maya sat in the debriefing room, still processing the magnitude of what she had accomplished. The girl who had been told she'd never make it through basic training had just completed a mission that redefined what was possible for human performance under extreme conditions. But more than that, she had used her capabilities to prevent catastrophic attacks that could have cost thousands of lives. "Ma'am, what happens now?" Colonel Hayes consulted her notes before responding. "Now you become part of a very small group of people who handle situations that exist beyond the capabilities of conventional military forces. The missions will be more challenging than what you just completed. The stakes will be higher. But Rodriguez, you've demonstrated that human limits are more flexible than most people imagine." As Maya left the debriefing room and walked through the installation's corridors, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Every person who had doubted her capabilities had been proven wrong, but more importantly, she had discovered capabilities within herself that she never could have imagined. The final call home that evening carried a different energy than her previous conversations with her parents. She couldn't share operational details, but she could convey the significance of what she had accomplished and what it meant for her future. "Mija, you sound different, stronger, more confident."
"I feel different, Dad. I feel like I found what I was meant to do." "And what's that?" Maya considered her answer carefully. "I've learned that the limits people accept aren't really limits at all. They're just starting points for discovering what's actually possible." Her mother's voice carried the mixture of pride and concern that had become familiar. "Are you happy, Maya? Are you where you want to be?" Maya looked around her room at the installation, surrounded by equipment and documentation from training that had pushed her beyond anything she had thought possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to operate at the intersection of human potential and strategic necessity. Yes, Mom, I'm exactly where I want to be. As Maya ended the call and prepared for another night of recovery at altitude that would have hospitalized most people, she realized that her story had evolved far beyond proving doubters wrong. She had become living proof that human capabilities extend far beyond what most people imagine possible, and that the real limits aren't physical or mental. They're simply a matter of whether someone is willing to discover what lies beyond the boundaries that everyone else accepts. The girl who had been told she'd never make it had not only made it, she had redefined what making it could mean. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.